This is a quiet story, told slowly. There's nothing you need to do, and nothing you need to remember. You can listen closely, or let the words fade into the background as you rest. The story will move gently, without sudden moments, and it will stay with you whether you're awake or drifting off. Tonight's story is The House That Learned Its Owner. The key turned with a sound that felt older than the door. Not a squeal or a complaint, just a firm click that travelled through metal into wood, as if the house acknowledged the gesture and accepted it. Eleanor Finch paused with her hand on the brass knob. Outside, the air was cool and faintly damp. Late afternoon light, thinning as it often did. A soft wind moved along the street with the steady patience of something that knew it would return tomorrow. Inside, the entry hall smelled of dust, varnish, and something faintly sweet, as though a cupboard had once held spices, and the scent had never fully left. The floorboards were dark and worn, smooth where years of footsteps had passed. The walls were painted a pale cream, softened by time. The house was empty of furniture. An emptiness carried its own sound. Not silence, but a held breath. Eleanor stepped inside and closed the door. The latch caught cleanly. The quiet that followed was not the quiet of a place unused, but of one between lives. A faint creak came from the stairs. A single tap from the radiator, sharp and brief. She stood still, letting her eyes move through the narrow hallway. 2 stories. A simple staircase. Doorways waiting without urgency. She flicked the light switch, and the hallway filled with a steady, warm glow. No flicker, no hesitation. That steadiness reassured her more than she expected. She moved slowly through the rooms. The sitting room held pale outlines where pictures had once hung. The fireplace was bricked up, but present, its mantel marked by ordinary years. In the kitchen, the cupboards were old but sturdy, their counters scarred by daily use. Upstairs, the bedrooms were plain. The smaller one felt as though it had once belonged to a child, though nothing remained to prove it. That evening, Eleanor sat on the floor in the sitting room with her back against the wall. The house felt cool through her clothes. She breathed out and let the day loosen its hold. It struck her then how a house could still feel like a container for memory, even when empty, like a cup that faintly smelled of tea. She unpacked only what she needed. A kettle she trusted. One chipped mug. When the kettle boiled, the sound softened the unfamiliarity of the place. She drank slowly, listening as the house settled around her. Pipes sighed. Floorboards adjusted. Nothing threatening. Just a building responding to warmth and presence. That night, Eleanor lay on a mattress on the floor and listened again. Streetlight washed the ceiling in grey. Her mind tried to turn sound into meaning, but she let it pass. Somewhere near sleep, she noticed the room felt warmer than it had earlier, as though the air had learned where she was and chosen to linger. She dismissed the thought and slept anyway, quietly grateful. Morning arrived without ceremony. Eleanor woke without an alarm. Downstairs, daylight softened the kitchen. She made tea and stepped into the small back garden. The apple tree leaned slightly, its buds tight and green. The place asked nothing of her, and that felt like relief. Over the following days, furniture arrived in pieces. A sofa, a table heavier than expected, flat-packed shelves that demanded patience. Eleanor assembled them in the evenings with quiet determination. Habits formed gently. Tea in the same mug each morning. Drunk by the open back door. shoes left by the stairs without thought. The house seemed to follow her lead. The sitting room held warmth longer. The staircase creaked less where she stepped most often. Oddities appeared softly. Curtains drawn closer than she remembered. A chair pushed in neatly. She laughed at herself and carried on. On a quiet Saturday, she opened the cupboard at the end of the hallway. Inside were small remnants of another life. Buttons, a faded scarf, a photograph wrapped carefully in paper. The photograph showed a woman standing beside the apple tree, calm and unposed. Eleanor placed it on the mantelpiece, not as decoration, but acknowledgement. Someone had lived here before her. Someone had also made tea. Someone had listened to rain. That night, the house settled earlier than usual. When Eleanor climbed the stairs, the steps felt less cold beneath her feet. She noticed a faint scent of clean linen in the hallway, though no laundry had been done. She let the thought pass. Weeks slipped by. Summer crept in. One evening, carrying a tiredness she could not name, Eleanor sat on the sofa and stared at nothing. The radiator clicked once and released warmth at the exact moment her shoulders dropped. "I know," she said softly, without planning to. The silence that followed did not feel empty. It felt held. Later, she noticed the bedroom window cracked open slightly. She was certain she had closed it that morning. She closed it again and stood for a moment, looking out into the dark garden where the apple tree moved gently in the wind. As sleep took her, Eleanor realized the house had become part of her breathing, not in a mystical way, in the simplest way. A shell had become a rhythm. The house was not learning her, she thought. She was learning the house. The first real heat of summer arrived quietly, without announcement. Mornings brightened earlier. Evenings lingered. The house warmed through the day and released that warmth slowly at night, the air inside carrying a faint scent of sun on wood. In the garden, green thickened, and the apple tree held small, hard fruit that felt like promises. Eleanor settled into a calm that did not erase difficulty, but made space around it. She invited no one over at first. She told herself the house was still unfinished, still not quite ready. In truth, she was learning how to live alone in a way that did not feel like punishment. The house helped without intention. It offered structure. It offered rhythm. It stayed. That afternoon, while cleaning, Eleanor noticed something she had not seen before. A faint line in the wallpaper at the top of the stairs, visible only when the light struck it at the right angle. It looked like the outline of a door. Not a real one, but the suggestion of one. She stood there with a cloth in her hand, staring. The landing was small, with doors to the bedrooms and bathroom. There should not have been another opening. The shape could have been a trick of shadow or an old repair. Still, once she saw it, she could not unsee it. She pressed her palm against the wall. It was cool and solid. No hollow sound. She laughed softly at herself and returned to cleaning. But the outline stayed with her. A quiet thought she could not quite set down. That night, lying in bed, Eleanor thought about old houses and the way rooms were changed to suit different lives. Sealed cupboards, blocked fireplaces, doors that once led somewhere useful and were later erased. She wondered what had been there before, and why the wall seemed reluctant to forget. The next morning, she returned to the landing with a tape measure and a practical determination. She measured the wall, then the room behind it. The numbers did not match. Not by much, but enough. The smaller bedroom was shorter than it should have been. A slice of space was missing. She stood in that room and studied the wall. The furniture was minimal. A bookshelf, a chair by the window. The floorboards ran at a slightly different angle here, the grain suggesting replacement rather than age. Her pulse quickened, not with fear, but with the small thrill of uncovering something hidden in the ordinary. Eleanor fetched a hammer and tapped gently along the wall. Most of it answered solidly. Then, near the corner behind the bookshelf, the sound changed. A faint hollowness returned the knock. She moved the shelf aside and found a seam beneath a thicker layer of wallpaper. It was not dramatic, not clever, just an old door, papered over and painted, hidden by habit rather than design. She rested her hand against it and paused. It would have been easy to walk away. The house had been kind to her. Opening hidden things felt like it might disturb that balance. Still, the seam existed. Ignoring it now felt dishonest. She cut carefully along the edge with a small blade. The wallpaper peeled back with reluctance, revealing the door more clearly. A tarnished handle sat low, worn smooth by use. It did not look like a door meant for daily life. It looked like a door meant to be closed for a long time. Eleanor took a breath and turned the handle. The hinges sighed as the door opened, releasing cool, stale air that smelled of dust, dry wood, and something faintly floral. Lavender, long faded. Beyond was a narrow room, no wider than a cupboard but taller than expected, tucked into the structure of the house. It was not a closet. It was a small, intentional space. A high, grimy window let in a thin line of light. Beneath it sat a wooden box. Eleanor stepped inside. The air was colder here, untouched by daily living. Dust lay thick on the floor, her footprints appearing immediately. The room was empty except for the box, which sat in the centre as though placed deliberately. She knelt and opened it. Inside were ordinary things. Letters tied with string. A knitted scarf folded with care. A dried sprig of lavender. A small, delicate key. Beneath them, wrapped in cloth, lay a book. The book was plain and untitled. Eleanor opened it and found neat handwriting. The ink faded but steady. It was a journal. Not a confession. Not a catalogue of secrets. Just a record of a life, written in attentive moments. She read slowly. The writer described the apple tree, the smell of rain, the comfort of tea in the morning. They wrote of loneliness without bitterness, and of the house as a companion, not in any mystical sense, but in the way one speaks to a place when there is no one else to speak to. One entry made Eleanor stop. The writer described leaving the bedroom window slightly open at night so the house could breathe, drawing the curtains closer together when the world felt too sharp, the radiator clicking at just the right moment, as if timing itself could be comfort. Eleanor lowered the book, feeling something settle into place. Not fear, not excitement, recognition. The house had not been learning her. She had stepped into a pattern already shaped. The warmth, the curtains, the open window were not signs of awareness. They were echoes of care, stored in wood and habit and quiet maintenance. She stood again at the top of the stairs and looked at the wall where the door had been hidden. It no longer felt uncanny. It felt remembered. That evening, Eleanor cleaned the small room gently. She wiped the dust from the sill and swept the floor. She opened the narrow window and let fresh air move through the space. She placed a cushion inside and a lamp with a soft bulb. Not to claim it, just to make it usable. She left the journal on a shelf. That evening, Eleanor made tea and sat in the sitting room. the photograph on the mantelpiece, catching the lamplight. She did not speak to the house. She did not need to. Living within it with care felt like enough. Later, before bed, she cracked the bedroom window open slightly. This time, she did it deliberately. The air that entered was cool and clean. The house adjusted around her with its familiar sounds. A floorboard settling, the radiator clicking once, then falling quiet. She lay down and felt the house around her, not as a watching presence, but as a structure, shaped by years of ordinary living. She thought of the person who had hidden the journal, who had made that small room for quiet, who had learned to listen until the house became something comforting rather than strange. Sleep came easily. The days that followed slipped back into their gentle rhythm. Work, shopping, messages that ended with pauses before goodbye. Eleanor planted herbs in the kitchen window, basil and mint, and watched them lean toward the light. She trimmed the garden enough to keep it kind, not enough to make it a task. The apple tree thickened, its small fruit growing heavier on the branches. Eleanor noticed the difference in herself more than in the house. The calm she carried now did not erase difficulty, but it softened its edges. She began to invite people over, just occasionally, and found that the rooms held conversation without strain. When the house was empty again, the quiet no longer pressed. Sometimes she returned to the small hidden room and sat on the cushion with the lamp lit, reading a few pages from the journal. Not every day, not with reverence, just as one might revisit a familiar voice. The writing reminded her that life could be built from simple acts repeated with care. On warm nights, she left the window open so the house could breathe. On harder days, she drew the curtains a little closer together. The radiator clicked when the evenings cooled. The sounds were no longer remarkable. They were known. The house did not learn her like a mind learns a face. It learned her like wood learns warmth, like curtains learn the shape of light, like a room learns the sound of a single life moving through it gently. Eleanor slept with the night air soft on her skin, certain now that she was not the first to seek peace here, and that she would not be the last. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thank you for supporting the channel.